Okay, it looks like we're hitting on 11:20.
All right, thanks for joining us, everyone. You are in the Self-Care and Wellness for Educators, Creating Your Wellness Plan session scheduled for 11:20 to 12:20. My name is Derek Lambert, and Kelly Mordecki is also here with me to moderate this session. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A tab on the right of your screen. And with that, Dr. Chris, you can go right ahead and get started.
Thank you, Derek. And everyone, and welcome back for those of you who are in this morning's session, and welcome for those of you joining us. This session is going to be about broadly about compassion fatigue, burnout, secondary trauma. The point of this session will be to develop a personal self-care plan. So we're going to get a little more in the weeds. I am Chris Scardamelia. I'm an assistant professor at the National Center for School Mental Health in the University of Maryland, Department of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. Little bit about my background, just very briefly, for those who weren't in this morning's meeting, to kind of give you the lens that I look through. Prior to I worked as a master's level school psychologist in public schools for about a decade. And prior to that, I had worked in juvenile justice settings. And in fact, the last several years that I was a school psychologist, or primarily a school psychologist, I had my regular traditional campuses in addition to serving our detention center and a residential juvenile rehab center and a post-adjudication center. So compassion fatigue, not just an academic interest, has been a personal interest and a personal need at various points in my career. So it's how I really connect with this material. A couple acknowledgments before we get into this. A lot of the material from this morning and again for this afternoon is based on or pulled from this Wise Teacher Wellbeing Workbook. This is free, downloadable online. You'll see the headstar.org. When you log into that, you'll scroll about halfway down the page, maybe 2/3, and you'll see a section for educators, and you can download the link there. I will give you a heads up, it's about 170 pages. So, and then also we've been able to continue to do these trainings with support of the National Center and MHTTC. So this is I am being sponsored by the Central East Mental Health Technology and Transfer Center out of the Danya Institute. And we appreciate their continued support. All right, so what are we doing? We are going to do a brief overview to kind of just set the stage of understanding the physical, psychological symptoms of stress. We talked about this a bit more in the morning, but we're just gonna kind of remind ourselves of that. We are going to look at healthy ways to respond to stress. We'll acknowledge some unhealthy ways to respond to stress, and then we're going to focus on some healthy ways, and then I'm going to walk you through what creating a self-care plan can look like. About how best to use our time this morning, I've elected not to pause time for everybody to fill out inventories. It looked like we'd be spending about half and filling things out. Instead, those inventories, if you have downloaded the presentation or will download the presentation, there's the presentation slides, and at the end of those, I've included every measure that we're going to talk about. So they're easily accessible, and you can go back and spend some more time with those. And before we really start to dig in, please feel free to ask questions in chat. There's the chat feature, there's Q&A. Q&A does get a little less crowded, so it's sometimes easy to miss questions in the chat. And I'm happy to stop and address any questions that you have. So just as that brief overview, why are we talking about this? We know that educators are stressed out. We know that education is a stressful profession. We all knew that before COVID, and there was nothing that happened over the past year and a half that made it any easier or any less stressful, right? We know that large class sizes, behavioral challenges, lack of resources, difficult physical spaces, just the bureaucracy, the workload, all of that, right? Like just piles on. And we know that it has an impact in the field. We know that teachers specifically, 10% leave after a year. In urban districts with particularly high needs, this can be as large as 70% per year, and that about a fifth of teachers, and this is pre-COVID numbers, right? About a fifth left within 5 years. Again, we're seeing nothing more than an acceleration of folks leaving the field. So we've really got to step back. And while there are some things systemically, well, there are a lot of things systemically that could be done to improve our situation. We can't just kind of sit mired in all of the stress until the system figures it out. There are some things that we can do for ourselves to sort of stay afloat in this environment. So these are the steps we're going to walk through today, right? We're going to get a little more clear on what is it actually that I'm experiencing, what type of stress am I under, help us decide which sort of direction we want to go for ourselves. The source of the job stress, we are going to take a minute to kind of think about what, and there's a little inventory out, but where exactly is my job stress coming from? How does stress manifest for me personally? Like, what are my triggers? What are my signs? How do I know that I'm really starting to get overwhelmed with stress? How am I currently addressing stress? What are some alternate ways or different ways that I could be handling my stress? And then I've got some worksheets for you if you want to try this out and how we refine it. So I am a school psychologist by trade and training. Of course, we're going to be taking data. Can't do anything without taking data, right? So to kind of just set the stage, again, I'm going to go more briefly because we spent some time on this morning. If you didn't join us this morning, you have questions, please put them in chat and we will address those. But we mostly think about compassion fatigue. We want to also recognize that compassion satisfaction is a thing, right? There's good things about being in our jobs. There's good things about what we chose to do. You know, I would ask that you just take a minute and you can drop it in chat now if you'd like to reflect. What was it that drew you to education in the first place, right? Why did you get into this? What was the thing about education attracted you and said, you know, that's where I want to spend my time. That's how I want to make my living, or that's what I want to do with the rest of my life. For me, I came to education really via working in the juvenile justice system. And all my years in the justice system, I didn't come across a single kid. And I worked with very kind of high level, difficult cases. Every single kid had something really difficult and traumatic in their background. Everyone. Often not addressed, sometimes not even identified. And I thought, okay, well, I want to, right? I want to work with kids in a way that we catch this stuff earlier. And school seemed like the logical place to do that, particularly at elementary school, right? Every kid comes through a building at some point. So it's kind of the best point of contact. And I really, you know, it's cliche, but I'm like, I think education is a great social boost. It is everything, and a good education goes so far. And I really do believe that all kids can be successful in our schools if we can help them sort of handle what they need to handle to be able to engage. But until we can help our kids, right, we got to help us. So a couple of things coming across in chat, right? Coaching and relationships, making a difference, being able to teach a subject matter that you're passionate about, helping students achieve their full potential, right? Content specialization, parents for educators, right? So you see some of the good stuff that comes out of that, and making a difference with students. I think a lot of people here, somewhere in this is, you know, I like helping others. I want to make a difference. I like working with youth. So while that's lovely, right? It also puts us in a space where we're really coming across a lot of very stressful things. And that's where compassion fatigue can come in. It's not specific to educators. You know, as we move through our lives, there's other stresses that come in for any of you with like aging parents that you're taking care of. Compassion fatigue can come into that, or any time when we're really, keep saying waiting to be approved to join the session. I know Derek will take care of you there, Deborah. I completely lost my train of thought there. So, you know, the compassion fatigue is a sort of a natural consequence of spending a lot of our lives caring for others. But just because it's a natural consequence doesn't mean that we have to live with it. So we're going to think about two types. Burnout is that kind of all low, heavy, a little more sort of depressive. I'm just down. I can't think straight. I can't. And secondary traumatic stress, which it comes from sort of being around people that are experiencing a lot of trauma. This is a little more, system is just amped up, right? Your nervous system is on high alert, and it's a little more akin to what we would think of being highly anxious, right? It's the startle, it's the tendency to be a little more irritable, and everything kind of coming at you. These are not mutually exclusive. You can be experiencing both at once, but a good place to start to kind of understand where you are, and this is the first handout in your packet, is the professional quality of life. I think it's 30 items. You just rate them on a 1 to 5 scale, and you get you come up with a score sheet that's going to give you a score for your compassion satisfaction, your burnout, and your secondary traumatic stress. And this will kind of help you decide, okay, where do I need to lean in the most? And it's also kind of nice to connect sometimes with that compassion satisfaction. Right? You may have a much higher score than you thought you would have, and then you can kind of be reminded of all the good things that you like about your job. If you find that your compassion satisfaction score is fairly low, that may be a time of kind of reflection. So, what is it? Are there things I can change? Do I need to kind of change up things about my job? Sometimes switching a grade level or a subject matter or role within a school can be helpful. But that in itself can be a little intervention to think, how can I pull more of that satisfaction back in? So this is where we would start. This is the first thing you'll do. Kind of figure out where you're going with this. But then we want to think about our job-related stress. And there's of course, many things that can, but really breaking it down into these 4 areas. Students and their behaviors, right? Just the kids themselves and dealing with that can certainly be a source of stress. But sometimes it's not so much the students, or, this is kind of an and or both and situation, just the teaching profession, the education profession in general. I think over the last year and a half, this has probably been highlighted even more. In that, we've all seen the news and the media, and teaching and schools and education isn't always talked about. And it does feel like as COVID has gone on, has been a bit of kind of blaming teachers, blaming educators, and not all the time sort of recognizing the support that educators need and frankly deserve. So there's just things about the profession itself that can be really stressful. It may be specific to the staff or school you're at. It may be specific about who you're working for or who you're working with. It may just be a more general environment about the staff in school. It might be a grade level. It might be just kind of where it's situated. But there's really kind of something about that particular location and that particular space that is really stressful for you. And then there's the workload, right? All the paperwork, all the everything. I want to recognize that I come in, I'm like, ooh, we're going to do more data. And you're like, really? Because data is sort of the last thing I want to think about right now, right? But there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of bureaucracy, and sometimes it's the workload that's really dragging us down. To help understand this, here is the PULIS stress inventory. And this looks at these 4 different areas. So again, you'll fill this out. This time it's a 0 to 3. There's about 30 questions. And this will help you sort through, where is it actually that my stress is coming from? When I would do these in person and we could all talk together, there was always at least one person that would say, I really thought it was the students. I thought the students were driving all of my stress. And I filled this out, and they're actually like the least of my stress. Far more stressful. We tend to pin a lot on our students and sometimes our parents because that's the most immediate. That's the interface every day. That's what I'm having to deal with. And so it's very easy to focus on that. But there's, oftentimes things just about the climate around us that are actually the sources of our stress. Why is that important to recognize? Because if I think all of my stress or the vast stress is due to students and their behaviors, and I'm like, I'm going to get on top of that. I'm going to learn to have better classroom management, and I'm going to learn strategies, and I'm going to have somebody that comes in and work with my classroom, and you focus all your energy there, you're not actually addressing the source of your stress, right? And that gets frustrating. It's like, but I reached out and I got help and I did this and I changed this up and I don't feel any different. I don't feel stressful. And the bottom line is not because all of those things weren't worthwhile, but because you were solving the wrong problem. So this helps us get a little more clear what actually is it about our school environment and our profession that is causing me stress. So you'll kind of get that where am I at in my levels, where, what is sort of the most stressful element here. And then this kind of talks about, so if, at any one of these that might be high for you, that student behavior, it legitimately is, right? Find better ways to work with students, maybe working with a more veteran teacher around classroom management. How can I address behavior easier? Like, what about, my classroom could I change up to work better with my students? Particularly if you've recently, either a new teacher or you've changed grade level and gone from elementary to high school or reverse. Sometimes it takes us a little bit of time to get our feet under us about okay, how do I manage this? I think as most have seen over the, what to me feels like an increasing number of kids walking in the door with really significant issues and trauma, really. I think 20 years back, certainly there were kids who were dealing with difficult things, but it feels like over the past 5 years or so, it's just every year it's getting worse and worse and worse. So that you don't know how to manage a classroom, but you're getting a level of need that really hasn't walked in your door before, and we're going to have to respond and sort of change things up. If it's the teaching and just the profession itself, finding other teachers whose approach and style is similar to yours, talking with others about this, how they handle that, and really kind of thinking about what changes are feasible, what might you be able to shift about it. Again, is there sort of a different school, different grade level, different tactic, but really looking more to sort of how you sit within the profession. There are things about that you can shift. If it's the staff or the school where you're at, finding other people, identifying other educators to just sort of engage around doing similar things. And really kind of understanding what about that school is stressful and what can we change? How can, are there things we can do to alleviate some sources of that stress, or at least bond with others who are dealing with the same kind? And then workload, if it's at the end of the day, it's the workload, which is significant. Addressing all of those other things aren't going to change this. So figuring out, are there ways to shift workload? Can we work with administration to pare this down, to get different support? Is it possible to share tasks? Can I be more efficient? And can I start to really, you start to narrow down what is really, really important. I had to go through that this past year and a half, as you switch to virtual and all of the steps, okay, so my best Cadillac version of this class or this lesson was this. I can't do that. So what about this is actually just the key we have to get through this material to move on. And sometimes we have to embrace good enough, right? Is it the best lesson that could possibly be created? Nope. Is it good enough? Yes, it is. And when we've got everything else going on, good enough really is good enough, right? And that really is something you go, yeah, not perfect, but good enough. All right, we're going to do a quick review that, we figure out what it is exactly that is causing our stress. What is the source of stress? How is that appearing for me? Great, but on a day-to-day basis, how do I know when stress is really getting overwhelming for me? And it's funny because you would think, for me doing, these trainings all the time, being a bit immersed in this content, that I would be super on top of my own stress levels all the time. I routinely, kind of get a little surprised, and I step back and sort of do this body scan and figure out oh, wow, I'm really stressed out. I really need to do some of my own interventions. So stress affects us physically, affects us psychologically. Right? Physically, this can look like frequent headaches, the tendency to stutter or stammer, like I've been doing a lot this morning, all that kind of excess motor energy. So fidgeting, tapping your feet, grinding your teeth, picking at your cuticles, things like that. You ever got a little eye twitch, right, that just doesn't go away, and it's like, oh, that's really annoying. That's usually a sign that you're under really high stress. Other physical signs, oh wait, I skipped one. Other physical signs related to your nervous system, like feeling your heart pounding just kind of randomly at times when like, no, I didn't just run a mile. Dry mouth, profuse sweating, disrupted sleep patterns, all kinds of like gastrointestinal upset stomachs, tingling or flushed skin. And then there's the emotional, psychological, right? There's the I'm getting more forgetful. I feel nervous all the time. I'm worried constantly. Can't even tell you exactly about what. I'm just worried. Or I'm really irritable and I'm jumping, I'm biting at people and a lot more frequently than I usually do, right? This is where, again, like this morning, I think it's good to take a pause. It's somewhat natural to think of physical manifestations like, oh yeah, that's stress. But when it comes to the mood and demeanor kind of stuff, we often start to blame ourselves. How could I be so forgetful? I cannot believe I walked out the door and left that amazing lesson plan that I just created on my couch. And how could I make such a mistake? And we really kind of beat ourselves up. And there's here, and to say, it's not that I'm a terrible educator. I'm really stressed out. And I know when people get really stressed, they get really forgetful or they get really irritable, right? And so that grace with ourselves. So the next resource that you have in your packet then is a way to kind of a more standardized way of really kind of understanding how stress manifests for you. So what you see here is just a snapshot of the top of it. But this is a daily tracking system. So, you'll go daily. And you can give yourself a stress rating across the top. So 1 being absolutely no stress at all, a 10 being this is the most stressed out I have ever been in my life. A 5 would be like, yeah, I'm pretty stressed out, but I'm handling it, right? So you can rate yourself each day what your stress was. If you're using a coping activity, you can note it here. What I usually would recommend is that for 1 week, ignore the coping activity place. Don't do anything particularly different. Just notice what's happening, right? So rate your stress every day and then make a check mark. And again, in your packet, you'll see this is a full 2 pages of all of those symptoms that we went through on this past 3 slides, and just check off. Did you experience this? Did this happen? And that will help give you a sense of, okay, these are my warnings. I'm really tipping into a place that's going to be problematic for me. I think giving yourself a week of just tracking just kind of helps you take stock of where you're at, and really kind of understanding what's going on. And then when you start to engage your self-care plan, you can return to the stress reaction log and just note, did you use your coping strategies? And what this will help you start seeing is, is there a pattern of, I remember to do my coping strategies on Monday and my stress rating was a 6. Tuesday, I got really busy. I totally forgot my coping strategies. And look, my stress rating was an 8. And we can kind of see is, number 1, just kind of get a sense of this pairing of coping and stress. Also help you understand if the coping activities that you selected they're just not the right ones. Because if you see that, yes, I did my coping strategies and my stress level is not changing at all, okay, so maybe we try something different. Let me kind of pause here because we've gone over 3 different assessments at this point, or sort of data points, a lot of background. Do we have questions?
It doesn't look like we've had any questions yet regarding the topic, but it's all really great information. I think it's so important to kind of check ourselves like this sometimes. Our self-awareness, it helps us, to guide the way we think and how we interpret things. So this is a really useful tool. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Welcome. Yeah, there are times, I'll just, like, I remember once I had a bit of an argument with my sister. You know how siblings can be. And in the middle of it, she got really mad at me. She's like, "Stop flaring your nostrils at me." And I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" And it was something I never realized I did. And it was actually enough of a like, what in the world moment that it took me back, that I realized that actually I was pretty upset over something else that had happened during the day. And I was taking it out on her. And my stress level from other things going on were getting pulled into this particular conversation. Didn't actually have anything to do with her. And so sometimes recognizing those signs can be helpful to say, oh, okay, wait a minute, I need to engage. All right, so we have stress.
And Stacy Gill said, or not Stacy Gill, but Andrea Gilman said, can we share some coping skills that people are using that work for them? So surely in chat, you guys could maybe share some of those. I know that one of my coping skills is like Chris talked about before, the breathing really kind of helps me, because in that moment when I have to sit there and focus on the thought of breathing, it doesn't allow the other things in. So I find that to be really useful. But it does take some practice, that's for sure.
It does, yes. Practice, practice, practice. And yes, we're going to get into some more specifics as we go through. So let's just, oh, that's so funny that when you're annoyed, you call her sweetheart. That's what I could see that being like, I did not realize I was doing that. But, it is a good moment actually just kind of pause here and remind ourselves that although we stressed, a lot of these nonverbals other people are picking up on. And that also, once we start tuning into what stress really looks like, we can start seeing it a little more clearly in others. And so when that student or that parent or that colleague, has a complaint or kind of comes at you, you're like, why was not it? It's kind of helpful to watch for some of the stuff and go, I just wonder if they're under a whole lot of stress and I ended up being the target of it. So there are unhealthy ways to respond to stress. Avoiding or denying it. I'm a big avoider. This one is always one that I have to watch. Just, I had a really bad parent phone call last week, and this week I've just been really busy. To make more parent calls, but there's this thing and that thing and the other, and I'll get to it. I'll do it, right? But really, what I'm doing, I'm just avoiding it. Or no, it wasn't that big of a deal. I didn't care. I mean, it was fine that parent got so angry at me, and I what was going on. Numbing or blunting your reactions, right? So again, just kind of getting into that numbing space, not allowing yourself to feel the emotions, and using social support systems to justify actions. Talk about, and we will in a bit, social support can be a really, really important part of our self-care and our well-being, but we can also get into those slightly sort of toxic, not healthy support systems or relationships where all we do is kind of gripe with each other, right? And we actually sort of talk each other into feeling worse and not into feeling better. So we don't want to spend a whole lot of time here, but it is good to sort of take stock of, am I engaging in any of these? When we talk about numbing and blunting, this is where things like having a little too much wine come into play, right? So there's nothing wrong with having a beer after work. But if we notice that we are really engaging in things that help us not feel our feelings, that's one of those warning signs, right? That I'm using this in an unhealthy way. All right, so what are healthy ways to respond? So we're going to start off with 4 big buckets. Alternate activities, right? Sometimes there's nothing to be done about the source. I just need to distract myself. I need to get out and do something else and get into a different headspace. And even if there are things that you could do you need to be doing those in that moment, right? Sometimes we just go out for a walk, your kids, do something else that's really distracting, and just set all of that other stress aside for a bit. This also kind of helps us ensure that we're keeping a bit of balance in our lives and that work isn't 24, right? I am taking time out to spend time with my family. I am taking time out for other things I enjoy. Even if that means those, 6 items that are still sitting on my to-do list aren't going to get done, so be it. have to take care of ourselves, because this thing is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And if you go at it with sprint energy, you're not going to last the marathon. We can reframe. Right? I can't change the situation. It was what it was. It upsets me. It bothers me. Is there a lesson I can learn? Even if the lesson is, right, I'll never do that again. Bad way to respond, or a really bad way to handle things. I now know, not to do that again. But what can I understand more? What can I learn more about myself? Sometimes what we need to do is yank ourselves out of our feeling brain and into our thinking brain, right? To engage in problem solving, it helps us re-engage kind of that frontal lobe, and we're gonna start thinking, and what can I do to make this better? When we kind of just get mired in, I'm feeling really sad, or I'm feeling really down, it's good to acknowledge those feelings, but that's not going to help move us forward. So sometimes we can break it down and just start to problem solve it. And then social support, right? Getting ideas, getting clarity from others, talking to others who are similar things. I think it's always interesting, as educators or folks working in mental health care, we live in these really somewhat unique worlds, right? In the world of education, language and its own sources of stress, and it's sometimes hard for people outside of our world to really understand why these things are so stressful, or what comes with it, or what the implications are. And it can be really wonderful to talk to people who are dealing with the same things and say, yeah, that was legit difficult. Hey, you know what I did last year that kind of helped? Right? We bounce ideas off each other. We problem solve with each other. We get clarity. We all need that friend or colleague who can say, yeah, I think you're taking that a little too personally. Or, I know you felt justified. I think there might have been a better way to handle it, right? That friend that can just get really honest with you and kind of call you, on your when it needs to happen. And that same friend that can say, wow, that sounds really, really, really awful. Sometimes we just need somebody to listen. So one of the things we kind of start thinking about, okay, well, what do I need to do, or what might work? I have more data for you. Right? Here's another inventory. Again, I think this one's like 28 items, but none of them are over 30. It's a 1 to 3 scale. And this is taking stock of where you are right now, right? Okay, so what am I doing right now? These are, when you've experienced something stressful, how have you coped? And I've never do this almost every day is kind of your range of scale. And you'll get an idea of how are you handling stress now. I know there have been times I filled this out and I'm like, oh, I'm just not. Like there's here that has, any real number of points in it. I need to do something. But you might find that, well, I'm doing a pretty good job with healthy alternative activities, but, I really have stepped away from a lot of my friend circles, and that social support piece could really, really boost. So how am I currently working through stress? And then what might I want to do moving forward? Like what I want to bring online. So yeah, I think this is where we'll go next. This is that self-care plan. So we kind of figure out our sources of stress. We identify our symptoms. We see, okay, what sorts of coping strategies are we using right now? What can I bring online? And so pick something that you want to try. And we'll go into some more specific strategies in a moment, but you're going to, on this sheet, again, this goes by week. So where it says used CS, that's just your coping strategy. This is just a briefer way of logging that stress reaction log, right? You've now understood your stress reactions. All I need to do at this point is track, did I use my coping strategy and did it help me? There's a coping strategy that works for everybody other than maybe breathing. That's pretty universal, right? But we all kind of have our own sources. We all have our own personalities, our own styles. So what works for me may not work for you. And what works for you may not work for the next person. And sometimes we may not have any sense of what's going to work for us. It's like, I don't know. I feel like I've tried everything and I don't know. So this gives us a way of really getting down to it and understanding what's helping me. So check off, did you use the coping strategy that day? And then the rating underneath that, if you look at the effectiveness scale goes from a -2 to a +2. So a -2 is a lot worse when I did this. A -1, I felt a little worse. A 0 is fine. I didn't notice any difference. I didn't really do anything, didn't do anything bad, didn't do anything good. A +1 is I felt a little better. And a +2 is I felt considerably better. I would track this weekly, try things for a week, but maybe not beyond that. So you want to track for 1 week, give yourself the weekly average. Not everything is going to work right away. Good to give it a couple days, give it a week or so, kind of get into it, give it a chance. But if you're in the -2 to 0, we don't want to lot more time than that. If at the end of the week you go, you know what, I never got above a 0. Like sometimes made me feel a little worse, never really made me feel any better. We abandon that strategy and we try. But it's good to check in periodically and make sure that what we're doing is actually helping. Because there's few things that would be frustrating than I have finally marshaled the energy to develop the self-care plan and I selected this coping strategy and I don't feel any better. This isn't helping. And unless we're doing this kind of periodic check-ins to understand where we need to readjust, then it just feels like that much less hope, or much more hopeless, much less hopeful, that I tried and I don't feel any better. All right, this is also included in the out, so you can go through and track. All right, so we went over these very briefly. In the morning, some of the other things that we talked about in the morning that I think are important to bring back here, right, is there's things that we do in the moment to cope. I'm feeling stressed right now, and I need to address this sort of. There's other things that we do that just set the stage in our lives to be less stressed. So things like that are engaging in regular routines, or at least movement, right? It doesn't have to be what we think of as, going to the gym or doing Pilates, or, for you, that may just look like I go for a walk every evening. I don't really do yoga, but I stretch every evening. Something where we are engaging in activity that's going to help decrease our stress levels every day. Exercise has a really direct impact on our mood. To the degree that we know that for mild and even into some levels of depression, an exercise regimen can treat that as effectively, at a mild level, can treat that as effectively as medication can. Exercise gets our body moving, it gets our all kinds of good things for our hormones, and can help us sort of dump our stress out. Want to think about stress, or one of the ways I like to think about it is you go, right, and all of this stuff comes in and it starts to fill your rain barrel, and it's pretty okay until we start to get to the top of the rain barrel, right? And then it starts to spill over, and that's where into really some difficult spaces. I mean, this is where we start thinking of ourselves as, or we really overreacted, and so we're not in life able to just stop all of the rain. I wish we could, right? I can't always control the amount of stress I often can't control the amount of stress coming in at me. But what I can do is I can dump out that rain barrel every day, every other day, as often as I need to. And that, right, I'm continuing to give myself that buffer so that, yes, it's still stressful, but I can do what I need to do without it impacting me in a really, really ugly way. I hope that makes sense. And so some of those daily activities, like if you are somebody who, does for a walk every day or hits the gym every day, what you're doing is you're dumping out your rain bucket periodically, right? Every time you do that, it's like, okay, we've dumped out a little more stress and now I can reset. Making sure we're getting good nutrition enough, but that what we're eating has some nutritional value, that we're feeding our body. Our body physically needs to function in order for us to handle our stress. And if we think back to some of this manifestation, our physical selves are important in thinking about how we experience stress and how we manage our stress. And when our body is in rough condition, it's not there to help us with our, so it's going to be more and more difficult. Same thing with like a, okay. So that's kind of some of the larger, right? Making sure that you're spending good quality time with friends, with family, with loved ones, you're getting that social support, and that when you're engaging in those, you know, they're happy spaces. I mean, sometimes we just have to set stuff aside, say, you know, I know, you know, partner, I know we need to work on the budget. I know we have this, I know we have all this other stuff, but maybe just tonight we could have a nice dinner. Because I think we all just need that moment to just stop and be okay with each other. If there's anything this last year taught us, I think, I mean, there's a lot of lessons learned, but I think one of the things was there were a lot of things that were considered absolutely essential. There's no way we can do our jobs without taking this data or doing this or doing that. It turns out, you know what, world isn't going to end if there's some things that we put aside. And it really forced us to sort through and figure out what was the most crucial, what was the most important. And those are the things we have to focus on. So other things to just kind of in your daily routine, right? And again, making sure that you're getting enough sleep and that you're getting quality sleep. And that we are periodically attending to things that are meaningful to us. Do you know, are you somebody who's really invigorated by art? You love, like I'm somebody that my happy place is an art museum. When's the last time I've been to an art museum? You know, I live 2 miles maybe from the Baltimore Art Museum, and it's a fabulous museum with great stuff. And yet it'll be months and months on end. It's free to enter. I can pop over there anytime. You know, why am I not doing that more? I love being like in the forest around trees. You know, again, in Baltimore, you go 20 minutes outside the city and you're in the forest. How many times am I doing that? Am I building these things into my life that make me happy, make me feel good? And then I can handle what comes at me every day. So those are kind of some of the big things, right? But then there's just the strategies. There's, okay, when I'm feeling stressed, what am I going to do about it? And mindful breathing exercises are really super helpful. The key is that you want to be breathing in for a length of time. You want to be holding it. That is really key. And then blowing it all the way out. The reason why we harp so much on breathing is our brains, for as wonderful and complicated as they can also be a little dumb. And that stressed, we have a tendency, even if you don't realize you're doing it, to breathe more quickly and not nearly as deeply, to kind of get into that shallow breathing. We're not taking. When we do that, our brain isn't getting as much oxygen as it would if we were getting, you know, nice, good, deep breaths, and not even getting as much as if we're breathing pattern. Your brain recognizes this as a threat, right? This is where your brain is, it's like, come on, right? But if it's not getting enough oxygen, your brain automatically says, we are in danger. Your central nervous system engages, an anxiety system comes on board, right? And now we're on high alert because your body's like, by doing those breathing exercises and that deep breath in and holding that breath, when we hold it, bathes your brain in oxygen. And your brain gets the message, we're okay. We're not drowning. We're not dying. We really are okay. A real physical reason why breathing is actually very helpful. Shallow breathing can cause yawning also. Yeah, because what is yawning? Yawning to get more oxygen into us, right? Anything to like, I need more. So like I said, our brain can be kind of, you know, we're in big trouble. It's like, no, you're really not. There's a lot of different ways exercises. But let's do the one that I described this morning, we'll do together just for one quick round. For anybody who wasn't there this morning, it's the simplest that I know of to do. And I've taught kindergartners how to do this. We're just going to breathe in for 5, we're going to hold for 5, and we're going to breathe out for 5. And then you can count that on your other hand also. Breathe in. And we're going to hold. And we're going to breathe out. Let's do one more round, right? So that's 1. I'm going to breathe in. I'm going to hold. And I'm going to breathe out. That's round 2. 5 rounds of 5, 5, 5 will help relax. And if you did that with me, just kind of take stock of your, do you feel a little less tense? I always notice that as I breathe out, my body just it just relaxes, right? And I become a little less tense than what I was the moment before. And at the end of those, okay, it's not, stress isn't gone. There's still lots to deal with, but I feel like I can handle it a little better, right? So the game's still going on. I'm just feeling a little better about my ability to play it. This is something, it doesn't have to be some big breaks and whatever. I had kids who would do this like before a test because you have test anxiety. Like you can put your hands in your lap, sit at your desk, minute and a half max, and walk through this. Muscle relaxation breaks are, that's a good tip, Kathy. Remember to use belly breathing for full breaths. And if you're not familiar with belly breathing, often the way that a lot of folks, if you haven't sort of attended to this, your chest will rise when you take really big breaths. But what you want is when you take a big breath, push your belly out. That is opening your lungs up. It's lowering your diaphragm. It's opening your lungs up, and the breath is much deeper. So what you want to practice is breathing in. You just put your hand on your stomach. When you breathe in, your hand should lift. And when you're breathing out, your hand should go in, and you're pushing all of that out of your lungs and then breathing in again. Muscle relaxation is very similar in that it gives us that pause. It helps us to physically take some tension out of our bodies. Again, there's a dozen different ways to do progressive muscle relaxation, but all of it boils down to starting, at the bottom of your body. We should start with our toes, sequentially up through your body, tensing a muscle group, holding that muscle group, and then relaxing. So you might start, if you are at home and you've got some time, you can do, and then feet, and then calves, and then thighs, and then your hands and your forearms, and you can get really, really detailed. If you don't have a whole lot of time, or you're doing this with students and they're younger, you can go feet, legs, arms, stomach, head. You can sort of break it up however you want. But in all of it, it is that you're tense, you're squeezing as hard as you can, and you're holding that, and then you're relaxing. And when we do that, our muscles will relax slightly below where they were before. So it helps our muscles relax, take some of that tension out. You can drop your shoulders or wherever it is you hold your tension. I also grit my teeth a lot, so I feel it in my jawline. Whatever your furrowed brow, right? Whatever that physical manifestation is, will relax. Both this and the breathing take a certain amount of focus and concentration to do. And so the benefit to this then is whatever it is that you were really, that you were thinking about or ruminating on or stuck in your head, you can't think about that and focus on your progressive muscle relaxation at the same time. So there's the physical benefit, but there's also a mental benefit to just simply not thinking about something for 2 minutes, however long this takes you. The third thing on here is movement breaks. So this might be a regular exercise routine in your life. Also, just simply getting up from your desk and moving for 30 seconds or walking back down the hall. Or if you're in a classroom with kids, like we're going to get up and just wiggle it out for a minute. There's, what do they call them? The Go Noodle on YouTube with all the different dances. If you're at high school, that might look a little different. I know I used to do sessions with students when I was a school psychologist, so I didn't have a whole classroom, but we would go walk the track and talk, right? We would just get out and we would just move, or just walking around for a minute, like making a circle around, right? Just moving. That can be really helpful to kind of dump that rain barrel over. It's also really good for your really kind of hyperactive ADHD kids. Like they need that movement, so it can serve multiple. It can be a solution in multiple different ways. Gratitude journals. I know I spent a bit of time this morning talking about this, but they can be really, really effective. A gratitude journal is the most simple way to do it is at the end of every day, things that you're grateful for, right? 3 things that occurred during that day, and physically write it. Don't just think about it. There's something to the actually manifesting it on paper and writing it out for, the colleague who helped me with my lesson plan, whatever it is. The reason why this can be so very helpful is our brains have evolved to look for threat, right? Our brain's primary purpose is to keep us alive and to make sure that we identify threat, we keep ourselves safe. So our brains can be rather dramatic in this direction. And we're also programmed to first look for threat. Lives has become look for the negative, look for the things that are problematic, look for the things that might cause me harm, whether that's physical or that's emotional. And if we don't really take the reins on that, we can get into habits of the negative is the first thing you see. And then sometimes we get into that habit is the only thing we see. Our lives are complicated and they are rich. There is always something good that happened. And so a gratitude forces you to, no matter how bad that day has felt, and maybe really was, right? 3 things that you're grateful for. 3, and it can be minor things that happen. So in the moment, that helps us bring a little bit of joy, a little bit of positive. Over time, what it translates to is retraining our brain to start looking for the positive. Really commit to doing a gratitude journal every day. What you'll find pretty quickly is you start thinking about it during the day. It's like, oh, I got to have 3 things to write down. So you're sort of looking for it, right? And you're watching for it in our interactions. And that helps retrain your brain to look for the positive instead of only attending to negative, potentially hurtful behaviors. And it helps us kind of give bring that compassion, satisfaction in many ways back into, and to feel just those good hormones for a minute, and it's like, yep, today was really bad and it was really stressful. There are a couple good things and I just need to end the day feeling okay. And then lifting up others. I think in the morning we talked a little bit about mindful moments, but this can often align with our social supports. But if you're really just struggling with, you're like, I can't do any of that. I'm really overwhelmed. Try this one exercise just for like a week, once a day. If you're in person, or email it or text it or compliment somebody, right? And a genuine compliment, right? I mean, we don't want to just, say things to say things, but say thank you, compliment somebody else. And find pretty quickly that when we compliment others, we get a mood boost out of it. So sort of think about it's a day that you've been having a bad day, and out of the blue, somebody comes up to you and is like, hey, I just wanted to let you know, like that presentation you did last week, or that lesson that you did, whatever time, I learned a lot and I really enjoyed it. And thank you very much. Or even, wow, I love that new haircut, or it's a beautiful new sweater. Or, I just really, really appreciate that you always come into our meetings prepared and ready to go. Whatever it is, think about a time that's happened, and that little compliment can just sort of change your day, right? It's like, oh, wow. And you get this rush of good feeling because you're getting a rush of hormone. It's making you feel good. And it can kind of shift things for you. That same process happens when we give other compliments, right? We are putting out that good energy for other people, but even in complimenting others, it's kind of forcing us to do the same thing the gratitude journal does, right? It's looking for the positives in our connection, looking for the positives in the people around us. And sometimes this can really help us appreciate our colleagues and feel a little more like, yeah, we are all in this together, right? But we're all in it together. One of my favorite schools I ever worked at was also one of my most challenging schools. Very, very low SES neighborhood, a lot of student movement. We had a lot of behavior, just a lot of difficulty, and a lot of pretty deep impoverished households and everything that brings with it. And we had the best principal who was incredibly supportive of her staff and of just a really great environment. And it was all like, yep, this is hard, but we're going to do our best, right? They're kids and we're going to make it work. And there was the administrative support that, yep, we are going to make it. And so it wasn't that I was in a really difficult school, right? There was a way of being in that school that was actually and uplifting. So that's another place to start. It's like, you know what? Every day I just get to make sure that I give one person a compliment, and it will come back to you. All right. I'm very mindful of our time. If you have other questions or comments, please put those in chat now. So we've got about 3 minutes. But I also want us to take a moment as we talk about the positive in our lives. You can drop this in chat. You can say it to yourself. You can write it somewhere. How are you going to celebrate yourself today? Right? Oh, small victories. And there is never too small of a victory. I have been avoiding calling that parent for the last week because I'm really nervous about the call. And you know what? I didn't even talk to that parent today, but I made the phone call and I left a message. And I've been having a really hard time doing that. So I'm going to feel good that I did that. So how are you celebrating yourself today? Thank you, Kelly. All right. So I said, put questions or comments in chat if you have them. If you want to engage in this, all of these materials are at the end of the PowerPoint. And I do recommend kind of going through each one and they're pretty quick. So it's not a huge investment of time, but there are sometimes surprising things that come out of it. And it will give you ideas about where to focus your efforts, right? So looking at those coping strategies and thinking, I already exercise. I don't need to exercise more. But, I really haven't been spending time with people. And the spending time with people thing, right? I mean, that's been so much more complicated over the last year. And I suspect for many of us, that is going to be an area where like, yeah, I actually do need to reengage. I've spent a lot of time with a couple people, but, missing our social networks, missing those just water cooler conversations and getting out there. Oh, thank you, Jan. It's a lovely comment. That self-care is something that gets overlooked. Yes. We often forget about ourselves. We are amazing advocates for our students and amazing advocates for family and for education. And we go the extra mile for others all the time, right? We've got to be amazing advocates for ourselves and give ourselves credit for what we do. So I know that we've got about 1 minute left. I just want to say thank you for your time today, but also just thank you for sticking in it in education. Thank you for what you do for our kids and our families. It is not an overstatement. And teachers were the glue of what held things together over the last year and a half. And you should be celebrated and uplifted for that because we owe you a debt that can never be repaid. So I hope you have some time off in the rest of your summer, that you get to do some things that are really uplifting and look toward our new school year. So thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us. We will be taking a break now. You can check out the galleries, etc. And we will have a lunch break. And then the plenary we'll be back again at 1:30 for our next speaker. And thank you so much again, Chris, for being with us today. It's always great to have you. And I really appreciate you sharing all this with us. I feel like really great and pumped up for the rest of the day. So thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
You too.